Hypocrisy is gross, but it's common. Pogroms are worse, but they are less frequent. So no one is surprised by an accusation of hypocrisy. You might be surprised, however, to learn that this guy also once led a pogrom, or tried to. First, the hypocrisy. From an article telling victims of anti-black racism to get over it. After all, those old forces have been scattered, and the historical crimes are past redress. You got that right. This guy has declared that historical crimes are now past redress. So forget about it. Pull yourself up from that perpetual victimhood. Stop being helpless and resentful, because who'd want to live in that sort of interminable bitterness? But when it comes to other victims, the approach shifts. The wounds are difficult to heal. History is blood-soaked. Centuries of hateful brutality. The cruelties of Christian men. And we assume women. Worse still, there's not a thing you can do about it, because the source of Christian hate is enduring. It's intrinsic to Christianity. The approach shifts, and it explains the pogroms, Christian Europe's oppression, expulsion, ghettoization, and hateful libels. We will get to Klavan knocked in a moment. First, a refresher on Middle Age expulsions, not a cheery topic, but in 1307, King Philip IV was in debt. He was in debt to his bankers until he outlawed that religious group on bogus charges, chased them out, and stole the gold. Louis IX and Edward I used a similar trick, property theft and expulsions against groups like the Knights Templar, the Lombards, and the Jesuits. That's right, Christian groups kicked out for the loot. You might have been surprised by where I was going with that, and you could add to this list Henry VIII's Reformation, aka the looting of the monasteries. Of course, greed does not discriminate, and these kings also coveted Jewish wealth. Specifically these two, they were equal opportunity offenders. I call this an early experiment in the ecumenical spirit. And sometimes the kings just stole the property directly, other times there was a twist. Usury. Here's the plan. A king or a prince welcomes in an outside lender who A. finances his wars with B. interest extracted from the population. When the debts compound, and they always do, the prince expels the banker, keeps the army, and rewrites the loans for his subjects. Cruel, but efficient, all thanks to a scapegoated minority. So no, I'm not in any way excusing the prince's actions. It's a sin. He used violence as a trump card in a game where he kept the loot and others got hurt. That does not make him a hero, not by a long shot, but it doesn't make him guilty of racial hatred either. All he is an entitled thug. Now, here's a story where Klavan tells us about a time where he felt and acted in the same way.
I was in London. I was traveling in Europe when I was about 18 or 19 years old with a pal. And we were walking in an alley.
And what did you see there?
Which was a game of three-card Monte. And if you don't know what three-card Monte is, it's where the guy shuffles around three cards, and one of them is an ace of spades or a queen, and you have to pick out the one that is a queen or the ace of spades, and then you bet money on it. And there was a crowd. There was about 10, 15 people there, and they're shouting and they're playing, and some of them are losing, but some of them are winning. And I'm watching this game, standing next to my buddy, and I'm watching it, and I see that some people are losing, but when they lose, I know where the card is. And some people are winning, and I still know where I'm following what this guy is doing. And I'm watching him. He's taking money off people, but he's also paying out when he loses. So I think, all right. So it's just a question of following this card.
And you can guess the next part. They place a bet, and they lose, and it's not really his fault, but
it was my fault, and it was my fault. So we left the alley, and we're in shock, and we get around the corner, and I turned to him, and I said, that was a con. Let's go get our money back. And we were two pretty tough guys. We were both of us got fairly pugilistic. We had actually been in a lot of fistfights as kids, and we were still kids. So he said, let's go back and just get that guy. We're just going to go and get that guy and take our money back.
And they try, but they fail because the card game is already cleaned up when they get back there. So what does that make him? An entitled thug. someone who used threats of violence as a trump card in a game where he would go get the loot and others would get hurt. And if you find that analogy offensive, comparing scammers to the expelled community, no, you're the one being offensive. Don't call them scammers. The card player did nothing wrong. Klavan was not happy with the result. That does not prove anything. Moral truths are not determined by how he felt about the situation. And speaking of feelings, Klavan did not care at all. He did not care at all when he saw other people losing their money.
And I see that some people are losing, but when they lose, I know where the card is.
In those cases, it was just fair play, but when it happens to him, it's a grave offense and it justifies violence.
So he said, let's go back and just get that guy. We're just going to go and get that guy and take our money back.
Again, he's threatening violence against the card player who did nothing wrong. That card player was faithful to the contract, and he had to flee violence, the threat of violence. In all honesty, probably just ducked into a pub to laugh at the tourists, but the analogy holds. And if you want to call this kind of gambling sinful, okay, but so is lending at usury. And no, I'm not trying to minimize the violence against the expelled communities. I hope you're not trying to ignore when it happened to Christian groups too. The only person whose suffering I'm trying to minimize here is Klavan's, that entitled thug. But there's two real reasons I'm picking on him here. Number one, because he said Christianity has a shameful history and a twisted soul. Try to make those claims about American history and he'd tell you to take a hike. No, Klavan, it is you who should be taking a hike. Because what you are doing is just as bad. It's even worse because you acknowledge that you know how corrosive, how demoralizing that type of claim can be, saying that your entire history is wicked and your soul is twisted. And here is number two, because you preach moral self-license. Here's how he sets up the story.
The way you get old and wise is you have to be a fool from time to time. That's half the process. The other half of the process is you have to admit that you were a fool and then figure out why. So here's a story about how I became, I'll reframe it. Here's a story about how I became wise.
And the big reveal isn't just that he's bad at cards. It's also that the people in the crowd, they were also in on the scam, which was a revelation to him. But he did not get any wiser. You didn't get any wiser because you never once considered that you were the bad guy in this story. All you know is that it's us versus them all the way down, and you are always the good guy. So whatever you do is okay, but no, we don't play those kind of games around here, and so we will give the final word to another secular person, but one who knows something that Klavan would benefit from learning.
The greatest speech I know of is the Sermon on the Mount.
It's unbelievable.
For everybody, for the whole world. This isn't a matter of who believes, but blessed are the peacemakers.
Of course.
And the part that I love about the teaching that I think is so important is, why do you point to the mote in the other's eye when you have the plank in your own eye? And what Jesus is saying very clearly, don't be a hypocrite.
Yes.
And don't just say they're evil without reflecting on yourself. This is so basic.